Hi, my name is Dave Reske, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we talk about the best ideas of marketing and digital marketing. And my guest today is Don Mueller, CMO at Trinity Life Sciences and former CMO at Vitech Systems Group and Sapphire, which is a fintech SaaS startup. She's also a board member at Capella University, and she has her PhD. Dawn, welcome to the show.
David, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm honored to be talking to someone who spent with such a great pedigree and education, and you've accomplished a lot in your career. So thank you for joining the show.
Thank you. And coming from you, that's high praise. So I appreciate it too.
And so you and I realized in our conversation that we have something in common. We both are teachers at colleges. So you got your PhD and you're teaching at a university now some courses. Just tell me a little bit about that. What do you enjoy about teaching?
Sure. Well, I find that teaching keeps me learning constantly. And I do enjoy the interaction with the students as well. So I teach a consumer behavior class. I don't teach these all in the same semester. I just want to make that abundantly clear. I teach an email marketing class on the graduate level and a mobile marketing class on the graduate level. And really that engage in the interchange of ideas and trying to stay on top of the topics. I find that I can borrow a lot of things from the academic world, bring them into the business world and vice versa. So I also like that I can help the students get past the theoretical and hopefully put a lot of things into practice. So
That's
I get a lot out of it.
That's great. Well, you're giving back and you're also helping the students and I totally agree that, teaching really keeps you sharp and keeps you learning as well. So that's awesome. Well, you and I have been talking about an important issue for marketers, and it's particularly important now because in this age, it feels like marketers have to have deep technical expertise, but also have to have deep business understanding because there's an infinite number of marketing possibilities that we could do and execute. And you brought up this concept to me of becoming a T-shaped marketer. And can you just tell me what does that mean and how do you think about that?
So I think the T shape is one of the cooler shapes. It's not the pyramid that we're used to. It's not the circle. It's not the cycle. It's a lot of different things. The T shaped persona is a bit more of a trendy metaphor. It's usually associated with agile, high performing teams. And what the T is, the vertical line is the deep functional area expertise, such as marketing. And there's also the broad across the top line that is all about collaborative knowledge that goes across the disciplines associated within a company or a business. And then just to make things a little bit more interesting, there's also the concept of the drippy T, David. So that's when broad knowledge starts to drip down into the new depths and making you just not a specialist or generalist, but really you're a learning machine and you're starting to be able to apply everything you do across the board.
So you can't know everything about everything, but you have to be an expert in something. So let's
Yeah.
just talk about those different areas, like the vertical line first. What are the most important deep technical or deep set of expertise, set of skills that senior marketers, CMOs need to have and really be extremely well versed in?
Well, I think it goes without saying digital, right? That's number one for the depth that you need. I'm also finding branding and product and demand generation, all of these things actually. So I can't prioritize one over the other. It depends on the focus of the organization. But I would say for CMOs, I think a recruiter had put it this way: there's the brands focused CMO, there's the product focused CMO, and then there's the growth focused CMO. And just like there's that T-shaped persona, there's the blended CMO, which may be strong in one of those disciplines, but then leverages those other areas to make sure that they're coming up with a blended approach for that. And I think that's really important. As a CMO now, there's also this concept with the T persona of that interfunctional coordination across other teams, other departments, and making sure that you're almost the cohesive glue. So having that deep expertise, being able to say, this is where we can apply digital, this is where we can apply branding, this is where we can apply demand generation, being able to create bespoke programs for the organization that you're supporting and evolving as the organization needs to evolve, as the environment evolves, as we know, lots of turns and changes with that. I think that's critical for that deep vertical expertise.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love the way you talked about, the deep brand expertise or the product focused CMO or the growth focused CMO. Do you feel like you need different types of deep expertise at different stages of growth in a company? Like, does the startup need one type of CMO? The growth company needs a different type. The mature Fortune 500 needs a different type of CMO, and is
Yes.
that, is it a different set of technical expertise required really at each growth level, or is it more industry focused, or how do you kind of think about aligning that set of expertise with the stage or the industry of the company?
I'm going to start with the last part of what you asked me about with the industry focus. You know, there's a debate always about, well, gee, we need to hire somebody in marketing with the industry expertise specific to us versus I need to hire somebody with deep expertise in marketing that they can apply and translate. And sometimes, it's a heterogeneity of ideas, right? If you're not pulling somebody that's directly in the industry. Okay, I had fintech experience. Do I need to only stay with fintechs? If I have life sciences experience, do I only need to stay with life sciences? It's really, I think this gets into that T persona again. It's having that versatility to be able to apply and adapt. So to answer the first part of that question, it really is bespoke. I think it depends on the stage of the company. I think it depends on really not so much what the company's selling, but the client base or the targeted client base that you're selling to. What's their degree of sophistication? If I'm selling to in an industry that's a little bit more old school, not as cutting edge, then maybe me putting the bulk of my efforts on digital and growth in that way might not work. I might need to do more on branding, right? So it really is becomes a bespoke process of figuring it out. So I think for any CMO, for any senior marketing professional, going in and conducting that assessment, that doesn't mean you're outsourcing the assessment. To me, it means coming in, conducting a listening tour, also getting the voice of the customer and also your prospective clients and understanding where your competitors are and then aggregating that information and saying, hey, this is, you know, perceptual map, one of the tools in the toolkit, right? Okay, this is where we want to be. This is where we are. And how do we fill in the delta? That's where I think the marketing can come into play. And I think a sophisticated marketer can really accelerate that process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now let's talk about the T part of the T-shaped marketing, the
Okay.
top line, because that's the probably the most complicated, I would think, because it
Mhm.
seems like most people would expect the CMO to have deep industry or deep marketing knowledge in some area that's appropriate for their business. But how much knowledge do they need about the rest of the business? How much knowledge do they need about finance or strategy or engineering or um, other, HR, other functional areas within the business in order to be effective?
I think you need to start developing that depth of knowledge if you haven't already. And when I say that, does that mean I'm going to go out and get a postgrad certificate in finance? No, but I have been working on a Coursera course for finance for non-financial managers. It does mean that I'm engaging regularly with my colleagues in human resources or people success, as they'd like to call it, IT, you name it. Sales goes without saying. We don't even have to mention that because it's table stakes for marketing. But really getting involved and understanding the whole ecosystem of the business and being able to make an impact. For example, recently we had IT had some things, and I said, wait, we need to be having an ongoing cascade of communication with our clients about the security that we bring to the platform. People success, it's okay. How are we driving employee engagement, and how can I help support that? So even if I'm not necessarily doing the work in those departments, I need to understand the challenges that they have in their world, and then bring up suggestions. They may not be directly germane to marketing, but I need to bring up suggestions to help them based on what I know. Because what do marketers do? Know your market, right? So it's helping those functional areas know their market, and then it's helping them craft what they need to do. And then, sometimes you are supporting with some of the marketing and communication efforts, but it's really about how do we make the biggest impact and the right impression and coordinate and work together. So
Yeah, that's going to make a huge difference in the organization. If if a CMO is just starting to think about this concept in depth, they kind of thought of themselves as experts in marketing, and now they're trying to be, a T-shaped marketer and get deep functional knowledge about these different areas. How would you prioritize that for them? So, and for this example, maybe just think about a typical company, but how would you prioritize? Like, if you thought about sales, IT, HR, and finance, which you mentioned, just put those in order for me. Like, from top to bottom, where would you really gain the most functional knowledge the fastest if you had to?
I hope it goes without saying sales, right? Number one, because why are we here? What are we in business for? We're in business to really drive revenue. All the other things are important, but at the end of the day, if the company's not making money, you probably don't have the job, right? So marketing and sales, it's the, if you want to go with a football analogy, it's the offensive, defensive coordinators, right, of the company, um, trying to drive the business forward. So that I think was number one. I would say people success or human resources is probably number two because, well, how do you make the business work? How do you facilitate the sales? How do you serve your clients? That's sales. Or you could call it revenue ops, that just to make it a little bit broader. I'd say that's definitely, so rev ops up there and then your people success or your human resources. And then IT too, because it's a close second or a close third, because IT again, we've got to keep all the systems running. We've got to keep everybody engaged and involved and able to do their work. So it's a lot of priorities. So and IT has both internal and external implications too. So does the human resources because it's internal people, but then it's also recruiting and retention. So
Hmm.
everything is nuanced.
Yep. And don't leave out finance, right?
Oh, and finance. I, finance. Oh, finance. No, I love finance. I really do. I don't like forecasting as much, to be honest, but finance is also important. I would say if you are managing to your budget and accurately changing things, then finance doesn't have to take as much time as the other areas will. So they're in there. I would say they're kind of across. So if you have sales and then you have HR and you have IT, finance is kind of across all of that. So
Yeah, that's that makes a lot of sense. As you think about the best way for marketers to gain this knowledge, there's a lot of marketers that have done a lot with on-the-job training or by connecting with their peers or learning from conversations. You've done a lot in education, obviously. You're a board member of a university. You've got your PhD. How do you view marketers who say, "Oh, I can learn about finance from just hanging out, going out to lunch with the CFO, versus I should take a course and really understand the details of what finance really is. How do you kind of view those different ways of learning these deep functional areas?
well, so you're talking about formal learning and informal learning. I'm a fan of both, and I think for anybody to stay relevant, you have to continually learn, right? You have to be obsessively learning, and that's you can take a formal course if you have a deep desire to learn. Like I said, I'm taking something on Coursera for finance, and I'm a lifelong learner. But reading, right? Those things, those books, right? Some of them you can have a Kindle or you can have it digitally, but I still love to read books on everything. And I think you can get a lot informal. Finance to me, again, I needed something a little bit more guided because it's a little bit more concrete. But everything else, I think with sales, with management, with human resources, I think you can do a lot on self teaching and also through the association and discussion with your colleagues.
Hmm.
And you should be discussing things with your colleagues informally as well as through formal meetings on a regular basis.
Right. And when you have that functional knowledge, you're going to be able to have a lot better conversations, a lot deeper conversations, getting quicker to a sense of trust and alignment. If you understand finance or you understand IT or you understand sales, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about some examples of really the kinds of conversations that marketing gets to have with these different functional areas when they really understand them. So let's just maybe we could just think about some hypothetical areas. But if you're CMO and you really are, let's use these in order, and you really get sales. Maybe you spend some time in the sales team. You understand that how they do their job. What kinds of conversations are the CMO having with the CRO so that they're really in alignment?
So I think, and I'm going to actually take a step back from that before I answer that, Dave. I think one, as a marketer, marketing expert, professional, you need to understand the business imperatives first. What's the business trying to
Mhm.
achieve? And then you can start to think about what marketing needs to achieve. And that's where you get it. So if we go back to that football analogy of the offensive defensive coordinators, marketing and sales, you need to know from the head coach,
Mhm.
right? So you need to understand what are the imperatives of the business. And then with sales, you're talking about, okay, let's talk about, so we need to grow the business if it's the growth imperative, or we need to retain clients. We need to build up the customer acquisition cost versus the lifetime value of a client. Whatever it is, you're talking about that. And you're in there and you're saying, let's see, we need to build up this part of the business over here. And we expect that to be the biggest part of our growth and the pipeline. Then you, as a marketing professional, is saying, okay, let's figure out how we're going to get there. So, and it really, again, it becomes a bespoke process. But you're in there. You're not saying, well, gee, what constitutes a lead? Right? That's foundational level stuff.
Mhm.
You're in there and saying, okay, we need to really come up with a targeted program to fill the pipeline with down market administrators or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And you are the person that's saying, okay, sales, this is how I'm going to clear the field for you so that you're going to have these not only marketing qualified leads, but they're going to be sales accepted leads, sales qualified leads, pivoting to opportunities at a really high conversion rate. And you're going to have your pipeline filled. You're going to be busy.
Mhm.
That's when you understand sales, you understand all those processes, you understand the lead scoring, what it takes, and you're making it happen.
Yeah, that really works. How do what are the symptoms you see in an organization when you don't have that T-shaped marketer there? So, when you have a marketing executive who's really just in their silo and they don't really understand or communicate well with the other functional areas, what are the symptoms that you would expect to see happen in an organization?
Well, keep your ear to the ground, right? You'll hear complaints. You'll
Hmm.
definitely hear complaining, "Oh, I don't know what marketing does. Oh, I don't know. They give us a bunch of leads. None of them are quality, and we don't have time to cull through them. Um, we don't see the point of anything." Also, the other thing I think you'll see is overuse of certain tactics that other teams are more comfortable with. So marketing may be saying, "Hey, look, we're taking a full funnel approach," which I am a big advocate of, right? You got to hit the top, the middle, and the bottom of the funnel. You'll see domination in one of those areas of the funnel as opposed to the full funnel. That's another symptom. I think you'll also see an overuse of certain tactics. Conferences may be example. Social media may be an example. And it's really none of those things alone in isolation, again, in that silo, will to get the job done, in my experience. It's really got to be a combination of things and really an integrated marketing approach. So when you have something standing out more than anything else in a tactical level, and you have some symptoms there
Yeah.
that it's not working.
And you want to avoid that. Well, let's talk about the alignment with finance, and we'll hit some of these other areas as well. So, what happens when the marketer really understands finance? Let's talk about that. How does that really fit well together?
When I think you're making you're making more informed decisions about how you spend the budget. I like to say that I'm going to spend the budget the way it's like it's my own money,
Mm.
and I'm pretty good with my own money. So I do think that when you're working well with finance, there are no surprises. You're on a regular spend occurrence, and it depends on the financial strategy of the company, right? Some companies want everything, you know, month by month. Some companies want it by the quarter. Some companies are saying, here's your budget for the year. Just make sure it levels out. It really depends on that. but then you're having a regular cadence of conversations with finance, understanding what's going on from the macro view of the company. Again, getting back to those higher level business imperatives where you're able to say, okay, this is what's happening at the macro level for the business. We have to cut for the quarter. I've been in some companies where every year, same time of year, you knew they were going to claw back. So you knew you had to spend before that happened. Other companies are saying, oh no, we want you to have a little bit of a buffer at the end of the year. Don't spend it all. So again, it depends on that, but keeping track of your spend and any churn, and then also pivoting. What made sense when you initially did the budget for the year may not make sense and in that first quarter or that second quarter as things change, as priorities change, as the market changes.
Yeah, and it strikes me if you really understand finance, if they have to have hard conversations about cutting the budget or increasing the budget or changing the budget, you're not saying, "Oh, that was my budget. Where did it go?" You
Exactly.
understand how it fits into the business. You understand their priorities, and you can respond in a more mature and engaging way to make sure it's all aligned rather than feeling like marketing is doing its own thing and finance is against you.
Right. Again, they should work hand in glove. And I will
Yeah.
say to that end, one of the things I've found that can really help with that is a strong analytics presence. Really being able to analyze and quantify the return on investment of marketing, so
Hmm.
that you're going to finance and you're saying, hey, look, we made this investment in this demand generation program, and the ROI was 48 to 1, just as an example. We know the company's hitting certain things. We know there's a cutback, but if we double down on this, and here's the analytical proof points of everything, we're going to help. We're going to help that downward trend go up. So then and you've had that ongoing conversation with finance, so they understand because you've taken them through some of the expenditures before.
Right.
So
And if you understand their function, you're putting that in language that they can understand so that
yes,
it just doesn't, you're not presenting numbers that they doesn't fit
you're
their
not just
calculus.
spending. You're not
Yeah,
just a cost center then,
right.
right? Now
Exactly.
I wouldn't say you're a revenue generator because I don't think marketing can always take credit for revenue generation, right? Sales closes the deals, but we can be revenue influencers.
Yeah, absolutely. We just have a couple minutes left, Dawn, and I just wanted to ask you, if you could give advice to maybe a younger CMO who's maybe just building his or her career and kind of figuring out how to become the T-shaped marketer, maybe this is their first CMO role or something like that. What advice would you give them in getting there to the point that they are the full T-shaped marketer?
So one thing I forgot to mention before about the learning, join groups.
Hmm.
There's something called the CMO Alliance. I think Exit 5 just started a CMO club. I belong to an organization called Collaborative Gain, which networks me with people too. Talk to your colleagues, right? Get involved with them, have regular conversations. That's one thing. And read. Those newsletters that come in, sometimes you can get overwhelmed with them, but skim them. Just even if you just get the headlines and read, and then if there's something you want to drive through, do that. And then also set up listening tours and just even quarterly touch points with your colleagues in the other functional areas
Hmm.
and ask them. One of the things I like to say is marketing is everyone's job in the company because in some way, shape, or form, everybody is representing that company. Everybody's creating and contributing to that image, the reputation, the brand, et cetera. So have those conversations. And that's what I tell everybody. Ideas are always welcome. You know, um, I think that's some of the best advice I can give a newer
Yeah,
CMO.
that is such good advice. I love the listening tours advice as well. Just
Mhm.
making that a regular part of your work. Well, Don, this has been a great conversation. You've given a lot of good advice and shared a lot of good ideas. If someone wants to connect with you and learn more about you or continue this conversation, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Send me a connection request on LinkedIn. Let me know that you saw the podcast, and I'd be happy to connect and have a conversation.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining today. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, David. Enjoyed this. Thanks so much.